Crowd dog.
492
That's
home
why
runs.
he's not getting it, because of his nickname.
Same number of home runs as Lou Gehrig. Lou Gehrig was pretty good though. Somebody would not vote for him. Good morning. Welcome to the United States Sports Academy and our weekly sports talk program. First, before we get started, I have Dr. Brett Simmermacher with me this morning, our Director of Sports Coaching, and almost Dr. Ben Billman, one of our doctoral teaching assistants. He's almost ready to be called Dr. Billman. Today we're going to talk about the Baseball Hall of Fame. As most of you probably know, at 5 o'clock our time, 6 o'clock Eastern today, they're going to announce the class of 2017. But before we start talking about the Baseball Hall of Fame, we've got to give our weekly update on the University of Connecticut women's basketball team. We barely squeaked by somebody last night, 92-42 or something like that. I know they won by 40 points. Anyway, they're now at 92 games in a row, the longest win streak in the history of college basketball, men or women at any level. So we'll continue to watch them. They play their next 7 games are all conference games. And they lost to Temple, one of the teams they're playing, in 1982, and the other 6 teams they've never lost to in history. So the odds are pretty good that they're going to be at 99 on February 13th when they play the University of South Carolina, who's a very good team in Storrs, Connecticut. I remember a couple years ago, South Carolina was number 1 in this nation and undefeated, and then they played UConn. And they got introduced to big girl basketball very, very quickly. But we'll continue to update the UConn women as they strive for 100 wins in a row, which is just phenomenal. Gino Auriemma said yesterday that Katie Lou Samuelson was on the trajectory to be one of the greatest basketball players in UConn history, which is saying something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you could put together an Olympic team of UConn alumni and probably win the gold.
Yeah.
Like we said, it's 5 o'clock this afternoon Central Time here in Alabama. They're going to announce the class of 2017 for the Hall of Fame. And so we thought we'd talk a little bit about baseball. It's only a couple weeks till pitchers and catchers report. One of the favorite words of baseball fans everywhere. Coming back from last year with the highest percentages are Jeff you have to have 75% of the votes to make it to the Hall of Fame. Last year, Jeff Bagwell had 71.6%. Tim Raines had 68.9%. Trevor Hoffman had 67.3%. Kurt Schilling had 52.3%. Roger Clemens had 45.2%. Barry Bonds had 44.3%. And Edgar Martinez had 43.4%. Those are the top 7. Well, probably no reason to go any farther than that. Ben was showing me this morning, ESPN did a poll of the 17 people that work at ESPN that have a vote, and they actually put 7 people.
They had 7 people on the.
Do you remember who the 7 were?
I know Bagwell and Raines, Bonds and Schilling, and then there are a couple new guys. I believe they had Pudge Rodriguez, Vlad, and I can't remember the 7.
Okay, yeah. One of the interesting things. I heard Tim Kirchin, who probably knows more about baseball than most of the people voting on this thing. Tim's probably forgot more about baseball than most people voting on this thing will ever know. A real baseball expert. He said that he's talking to people, and he thinks that Bonds and Clemens will make a big jump this year from 45%, where they both were last year, into the mid to high 60s. And he said if they do that, they'll probably get in next year. He also said he's voted for him all 5 years, both of them. Peter Gammons, his ballot was on. You can find Peter Gammons' ballot today. If there's one person in America that knows more about baseball than Tim Kirchin, it's probably Peter Gammons. And his ballot is on the internet today, and he actually voted for both Bonds and Clemens. So that'll be interesting to see where that goes. With the holdovers from last year and the 2017 first-timers, Brett, if you had a vote, who would you vote for?
You talking about the first timers or the holdovers, or a combination of?
Combination of.
I think the first 3 have to go or will go in. Bagwell, Raines, and Hoffman, and I think Pudge, Vlad, and probably Jason Verite would be my.
Wow, that's way down there on the list.
Yeah.
Verite.
I just think with what he did in Boston, He was part of those teams, and he was the guy.
So was Tim Wakefield.
You know, he would be a close next for me, just because of his longevity and the amount of time that he spent in the league.
Ben, if you had a vote, who would you vote for this year?
I would go with Bagwell and Tim Raines. I would put Barry Bonds on my ballot. I think it's time to include him, and then I've got Pudge and Vlad as the first timers coming in.
Okay.
I feel pretty confident about Vlad. Pudge, not real confident. He'll either get in this year or next year, but I'd have him on this year.
Yeah, that Sports Illustrated panel did not have him on the list. They had him just missing, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
And I'd like to add, if they're going to allow Clemens and Bonds in, then Pete Rose should be on the ballot.
Pete Rose can't be on the ballot anymore. He's got to go to the Old Timers Committee now. One of the things that's interesting, Tim Kirchner was talking about this yesterday on TV. Tim Raines statistically is the second best leadoff hitter of all time, behind only Ricky Henderson. And
He wasn't very good.
this is Raines' last year on the ballot. You know, if you look at the ballots online, some of them are like 14 or 15 years, but they've changed the rules recently. So Tim Raines is one of those guys that 10 years is the max, and they go to the Old Timers Committee. So Tim Kirchin said that he thinks that having talked to a bunch of voters, kind of doing an informal poll, that Bagwell and Raines are going to make it with big numbers this year. And he didn't really talk much about the first timer. He kind of talked. He talked mostly about Bagwell and Raines, and then he talked about Bonds and Clemens. I think this is going to be a big test for Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds. You know, Mike Piazza got in last year, and there was just the rumors about Piazza, no proof, and Bagwell's kind of in that same boat, and so is Pudge Rodriguez. You know, you've heard whisperings about those three guys. Some of the baseball purists seem to think that by the Old Timers Committee putting Bud Selig into the Hall of Fame, who was in charge of baseball during the steroid era, they even had symbolically, they showed the doors to the Hall of Fame opening on ESPN this morning. They said that putting Bud Selig in, who obviously knew what was going on.
Sure.
They think that's opened the door for folks. I mean, Barry Bonds is one of the three best hitters who ever walked on the planet, and Roger Clemens is probably in the top 5 pitchers of all time. So they should be in the Hall of Fame, and the reason they're not is pretty obvious. But you know, it's like one I think is either Buster Olney or Jason Stark. I heard him say a couple months ago, unless you can give me a list that says exactly with 100% proof these guys did, these guys didn't, I think you need to just go on the baseball statistics from that whole era. And I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Sure.
Because you know everybody said, well, Alex Rodriguez is clean. He's going to take care of this by hitting 800 home runs and breaking Barry Bonds' record. We don't have to worry about it anymore. And then we found out that Alex, you know, and I'm sure there's some guys out there that, you know, that are just their reputation is pristine, and nobody would ever think that they were doing it. Who probably endeavored to improve their statistics at some point in time. Well, if I was voting this year, I'd vote for Clemens and Bonds. Although I was never a big Roger Clemens fan, I would vote for Tim Raines. I wasn't a Bagwell guy, so I'd let him go. He's probably going to get in though. And I agree with you guys, Ivan Rodriguez and Vladimir Guerrero. I would also vote for Fred McGriff because he was one of my favorite players, and I think his statistics warrant Hall of Fame consideration with 492 career home runs.
So nobody wants Trevor Hoffman?
Pedro Gomez from ESPN voted for him.
I mean, he's
Voted for Trevor Hoffman.
I have Hoffman going in 2018, so I
And
would,
Fred McGriff.
I would vote for him next year.
And that's when they had Ivan Rodriguez. Our first timers this year, other than Rodriguez and Vladimir Guerrero, who we've already talked about, Manny Ramirez, who, if you just look at the numbers, is certainly a Hall of Famer.
Sure.
I mean, he is.
He was one of the rocks in my fantasy baseball team, man. He was a point machine.
Manny being
Yeah, Manny being Manny could rake. You know, there was a point in the middle of his career where the baseball purists, the experts were saying he was the greatest right-handed hitter of our generation, and he was an RBI machine and won 2 world championships with the Red Sox. Mike Cameron, J.D. Drew, Jorge Posada, Magley Ordonez, Derek Lee, Tim Wakefield, Edgar Renteria, Melvin Mora, Carlos Guillen, Casey Blake, who I have no idea who that is,
Played for Cleveland.
Jason Varitek, Orlando Cabrera, Pat Burrell,
Pat Burrell.
Freddie Sanchez, Arthur Rhodes, and Matt Steers. That's the ballot. That is the official Baseball Hall of Fame ballot, not mine. And that's the order they put them in. So I'm guessing they think Rodriguez, Ramirez, and Guerrero are the top three potential guys there. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. It could be a big list this year, which I think it was a big list that kind of hurts Bonds and Clemens. Where if you look at next year, let's look at the first timers according to the Baseball Hall of Fame. Again, this is their list, not mine. The first timers they have on the list for the class of 2018 are Chipper Jones, Jim Tomei, Scott Rowland, Andrew Jones, Johan Santana, Johnny Damon, Carlos Zambrano, Jamie Moyer, Omar Vizquel, Chris Carpenter, and Levan Hernandez. I personally think Chipper Jones will get in. People most of the time recognize him as either the second or third greatest switch hitter of all time. Mickey Mantle, of course, being first, and then you can make the argument with Chipper Jones and Eddie Murray as who's second, who's third. The most valuable player in the National League. Played in a lot of postseason games with the Braves. I personally think Omar Vizquel's a lock because I think Omar Vizquel is better than Ozzie Smith defensively, and he's got about 500 more hits than Ozzie Smith had. I was surprised when I looked. He almost made it to 3,000. He's got like 29.52 or something like that. And man, when him and Roberto Alomar were playing the middle infield for the Indians, that was some kind of special defense. I remember John Kruk, who's not on ESPN anymore, but I thought he was great on TV. He said when John Kruk was in his second year at San Diego as a first baseman, and Robbie Alomar came to the Padres, and in the first game, Robbie said, "John, where do you usually stand?" And he goes, "I stand about 4 feet off the line." And Robbie said, "You stand on the line, and I've got everything from your right foot over." And he said that was about true. So who do you guys like for the first timers in 2018? Brett, I'll let you go first.
Well, I think what you said, Chipper. I think Jim Tomei might be a first-time ballot guy.
Jim Tomey's interesting because he's got 600 home runs, and he's a big guy, but there was never a hint of suspicion about him.
And he played for such a long time, and the time that he did play, and it didn't matter what team he was with, they always were in the postseason.
Very successful.
Yeah. Always in the postseason.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said for that. Guys that moved to
Well,
a team.
winners.
I mean, Pudge Rodriguez, same thing. It seemed like every team he was on, they always did well. And yeah, I agree with Tomey.
Yeah.
I have Jones and Tomey as the new first timers in 2018.
I think I'm kind of biased about Vizquel because I was living in Ohio at that time, being in Ohio and growing up there, being on the Indians. But I think another one that he's not going to be a first timer, but he's probably going to get in is Jamie Moyer. That guy pitched forever.
Longevity.
If you're a left-hander and can throw strikes, you can pitch to like 80.
Yeah. Yep.
So you got Chipper Jones, Jim Tomei, and Omar Vizquel. I've got Chipper and Vizquel, and
I've got Chipper and Tomey. Those are my
plus
two.
you've got a couple, Ivan Rodriguez,
Yeah.
that you're going to vote for next year. And then we go to 2019. The first name on the list in 2019
No brainer.
is Mariano Rivera. And I was joking with Ben and Jason last week, and I said, on principle, I'm against the death penalty because I think it's an uncorrectable mistake, and we've seen in the last few years that a lot of people have been taken off death row with new technology. So if that's a mistake you can't fix, that's the only reason I'm against the death penalty. There's nothing involved. I just think it's too risky to make a mistake that you can't fix. But I could support the death penalty for somebody who didn't vote for Mariano Rivera. One of the things I heard on TV this morning, starting with the class of 2018, all the votes are going to be transparent. So like Peter Galen's put his vote up today. Everybody who votes starting next year, their ballot, you'll be able to look at their ballot. And one of the baseball guys on ESPN this morning was saying that could force those people who would otherwise not vote for Mariano Rivera, and for the life of me, I can't think of one single reason why he would not. but he may be the first one to get 100% because people will be
Yeah.
afraid to tell
Well, they'd have to answer a lot of questions.
Right.
a whole
yeah.
lot of questions.
Their
I mean,
name would be run through the mud if they don't.
I mean, how do you not vote the guy in?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like last year, 3 people didn't vote for Griffey.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always bring this stat up because I heard Chris Berman say it once on TV. 42 people didn't vote for Willie Mays. I mean, and part of that was probably a little bit on we were just at the end of some
Right.
of those old codgers with a little bit of tinge of racism
The racial
with Willie Mays.
aspect, yeah.
But I mean, Mariano Rivera not only was the greatest closer of all time, but he's one of the greatest people of all time.
Yep.
So anybody not voting for him, I think, would just. If I was in charge, anybody who didn't vote for Mariano Rivera would never vote again.
Yeah.
I would just
They
say,
should be taken off.
I would say, dude, you've lost your right to vote.
Yeah.
Like they did to Dan Levitard. Was it 2 years ago?
I believe so.
Dan Levitard let basically his listeners fill out his Hall of Fame ballot.
Oh, that's right.
They went for like 3 days on the radio. People called in, texted, and everything. And the
They
thing that
took
was
his
really
vote
funny was
away.
his ballot was good.
Yeah, I
His
remember.
ballot was really good. I mean, it was
Yeah.
almost perfectly in line with who got selected with them old codgers in the Hall of Fame. The Baseball Writers of America. They got all irritated and took his vote away from him. The other 2019 first timers are Roy Halladay, Todd Helton, Andy Pettit, Lance Berkman, Roy Oswalt, Miguel Tejada, and Placido Polanco.
Mm.
Only 8 of them. So, I mean, I think we're all in agreement on the first one. What about Roy Halladay? That's an interesting.
That's an interesting one.
Not a lot of wins for a starter, but 2 no-hitters.
Had a great career.
A perfect game, or not was no hitter in the playoffs.
Right.
No hitter in the playoffs. Cy Young.
I think he'll
almost-
eventually get in, but I don't
Multiple
think he's a
Cy Young.
first time guy. But I think eventually he does get in. Yeah, I think Pettit does too. At some
Not on the
point,
first time.
but not the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it will be interesting in 2019 because of the greatness of Mariano Rivera. Is that going to hurt everybody else just because he's so good
Yeah.
and such a hot candidate? Is he going to be compared to everybody else? If I was voting in 2019, the only guy I would vote for is Rivera
Mhm.
because, in a sense, he, 2019 should be all about him in a sense. And then I would wait 1 year on Halladay, Helton, and Pettit. And vote for them in 2020.
But it'll be interesting to see who's left over from 2018.
Yeah, it will.
Yeah.
And I think if Mariano Rivera is the one guy in that's a case that could help Bonds and Clemens.
That's true.
Because those are 2 guys that you can talk about in the same sentence with Mariano Rivera.
Mhm.
Sure.
Where nobody else. Those are the only 2 guys on any of these ballots that you can legitimately put in the conversation with Mariano Rivera.
Mhm.
What a class that would be. Rivera, Bonds, and Clemens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
3 of the all-time greats.
And then by that time, the old timers vote Rose
Wow.
in that same class.
That would be that would be quite
Let's
a
get
class.
that going.
Well, we will. I will probably be listening to it on ESPN radio, since I'll be driving home from work. We leave here at 5, and they're announcing it right at 5 our time. I'm sure they call the guys earlier in the afternoon and probably swear them to secrecy.
Sure.
They give them that big phone call. It'll be interesting if any of them are unable to keep it secret, which has happened in the past.
I'll get the update on my phone.
Yeah. You get that do. Yeah. It'll be interesting. It could be a big class this year. And, like we said earlier, the 17 people at ESPN who have a vote put 7 people in,
Mhm.
and I think that's a pretty good representation. Next week, we may be on location. We're still working out some details. On a week from this coming Saturday is the Senior Bowl, the college all-star game that's held every year in Mobile. We've got they just announced that O.J. Howard's coming to the Senior Bowl. We've got a lot of Alabama players from
Auburn.
the team that finished runner-up this year. I want to say they lost to Clemson. Clemson Clemson won, Alabama didn't lose. And we talked about that last week, about how evenly matched those two teams are. Lot of Senior Bowl is always fun because a lot of great players from all over the country get together. There'll be a lot of NFL coaches in town watching them.
GM.
A lot of the coaches and GMs actually leave before the game because they see everything they need to see in practice.
Right.
They even usually hold one practice in Fairhope at the football stadium down there, but they're not going to do it this year because they asked the city of Fairhope for
$35,000.
and the new mayor said, "Nah, we don't think so." Anyway, we hope everybody's favorite baseball player from 5 years ago or more gets in the Hall of Fame, and we'll see those results.
NFL this weekend.
Say what?
NFL this weekend.
Playoffs this week. It doesn't matter. I've got all 4 teams in the Super Bowl. Yeah, enjoy the playoffs this week. 4 great quarterbacks. They said on TV this morning you have to go back to 1992 when the 4 quarterbacks were Jim Kelly, Joe Montana, who was with the Chiefs, Steve Young, and who was the 4th one I said? Troy Aikman.
Yes.
Troy Aikman, Steve Young, Joe Montana, and Jim Kelly was the last time we had 4 quarterbacks of this caliber in this round of the playoffs. And this year with Aaron Rodgers, Matt Ryan, Ben Roethlisberger, and Tom Brady. 3 of them who have won Super Bowls.
Mm-hmm.
A total of 7, 4 for Brady, 2 for Roethlisberger, and 1 for Aaron Rodgers. I'm a New England fan, so I'll probably be rooting for Atlanta because Aaron Rodgers scares the heck out of me. So anyway, we hope everybody has a great weekend. We hope your favorite player gets selected to the Hall of Fame for induction in August. And we'll see you next week at 11:30 a.m. Central Time, either from here at the campus of the United States Sports Academy, or maybe on location at some event for the Senior Bowl. Everybody have a wonderful week in sports.